Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
So, some of you have probably seen my video before where I demonstrated how I made the fiberglass sealed kick enclosures for a project we're working on in the shop. And I'll be honest with you, when I created those, I really, didn't put a lot of engineering into them. I figured because I needed the space, I had to create a space to put these speakers because I didn't have, a spot where I could just put a hole and mount them like a door or whatever. So I had to create a space. So I created a space volume-wise as big as I could, okay? And I didn't really measure how much volume I had till after I was done. So once I got these things on the bench, I wanted to test these things out. So, let's see how they sound. And I've got all these other speakers. Let's see how they compare. I've listened to these speakers hundreds and hundreds of times. So let me show you what I found. All right, so we've got the kicks playing and they are full range. They are in a sealed enclosure, and I'll get to how large the volume is when I go over some specs and some stuff here in a minute. But I'm going to kind of tell you kind of what I ran into while playing these. I'm going to play these for you right now, especially at volume.
The top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, no, this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now.
So one of the things that you'll notice here is when I cross them over, and I'm going to go over some crossover things and some other stuff with you as well. When I cross them over, you really don't notice much of a difference. Okay, that's crossed over. That's full range.
Pull back the curtain and you'll see the different vermin. We all have different burdens that all seem to.
So one of the things that I noticed while playing these, and I've got these Focal Flax. These are the Focal Polyglass. They're very similar speakers. They sound pretty similar. Construction, the cone material is just kind of different. Was that there was a lot. It's hard to explain. So what it felt like while playing these versus the ones in an open baffle was that the woofer excursion felt very constrained, okay? It felt like it was in too small of an enclosure. Imagine that. So my first step was figure out how big these enclosures are, okay? So I literally just filled them up with water, and I got 5 liters out of it, which comes out to like 0.23 cubic feet. So about a quarter of a cubic foot. Once you subtract the divider, the driver, they're not very big, okay? So then it was like, well, what size should the enclosures be? I don't have room in this kick area to construct a bigger kick, sealed kick, okay? So that's not gonna happen. So what do I do? So I looked up some specs, looked up some stuff. Here's what I came up with. So whenever you get a speaker, you can get the TS parameters, which are the Thiel small parameters here, and check them out. Okay, these are here for a reason. There's a reason why manufacturers give you this stuff. So I got the TS parameters for these speakers here, these woofers, and trying to know what all this stuff means. Okay, so I went through and I said, okay, what is the FS? Okay, so here's what the FS is. It's the resonant frequency where the speaker plays with the least amount of effort in free air. Now, this is a number that's important, but it's not absolute because you're not going to be running speakers in free air. Okay, so the FS on these speakers is 68 hertz. Okay, so and the FS is where the speaker's highest distortion occurs. Okay, so if you're trying to get these speakers to play 50 hertz, obviously anything over 68 hertz is a problem. But again, these change when they go into an enclosure, right? So now we've got the VAS. Okay, so this is the equivalent air volume that provides the same compliance as the suspension of the speaker, meaning the spider, the surround, all that is the suspension of the speaker. So the larger the value, the looser that is, and would require a larger enclosure. Okay, so this is really important number here, the VAS. So we look at these the VAS number, and it's 9.961. Okay, so all these values all come into play to a lot of different things. So we gotta look at them as a whole as well. So then we got the QTS, which is the total dampening factor that balances electrical and mechanical control over the speaker's movement. So it's like the shocks on your car. You've got compression and rebound. So if you have too strong of a motor structure and not enough, mechanical, i.e. the spider and the surround, then your speaker is just gonna flutter out of control. So that's kind of what I was having here. It was throwing off some of these values. Okay, so especially the VAS, right? These are all things that we need to take into effect. So the biggest thing that I didn't take into consideration was the enclosure size. Okay, and I want to say thanks to my buddy Nick. He was a big help on doing a lot of this stuff, and also talking to the guys over at Focal. And they have a tech guy, and I don't think they are actually employees. I think they're just independent contractors. This dude was working out of his shop when I talked to him, gave me some great information. Okay, so one of the things that I needed to look at was this value here, the VAS. So this speaker has a VAS of 9.961. And you got to keep in mind that is basically how much airspace this thing needs is 10 liters, okay? These are in 5 liters, okay? So this enclosure is less than half the size that it really should be. And so what we're doing is we're over dampening the speaker. And so the motor structure is fighting that. And that's not good, okay? I really don't think in the area these are going in that I could put a half a cubic foot of airspace to put these speakers in. So there's a problem. So another value that's really interesting to look at here, as well as the FS. Okay, your FS is your resonance frequency. This is where we talk about where the speaker distorts. And Jim at Orca, which is the distributor for Focal, said a good rule of thumb is 1.5 times your FS is where you should cross your speaker over. Okay, so these speakers with an FS of 68 really should be crossed over at around 90-95 hertz. Okay, this is where they're going to be happy. This is where they're not going to distort. Okay, so that's important to see. So one of the things also it's cool to look at here are these graphs and these charts and the impedance rise and all that stuff. So one of the things that
these speakers totally just roll off at, you know, about 100 and see where that specifically is at, you know, above 100 hertz. These speakers are already falling off. That's why when I cross them over, the speaker's already naturally rolling off there. And that's why when I switched on and off the crossover, it really didn't make much of a difference. Okay. And I believe these two different charts on the high end are have to do with the phasing direction of the speaker, off axis, on axis. I think this is off axis at, you know, like 45 degrees or something. You lose, you know, these frequencies in it. So anyway, so how do I make these work? Well, let me show you what I did and the results I got. All right, so we're looking at the back side of the kick. And don't confuse this with a port. This is not a ported enclosure, okay? This is still an infinite baffle, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a hole on the sheet. This is that would be up against the sheet metal on the below the A-pillar in the car, and it's going to actually vent out into the outside of the car. So I'm going to put some foam sealing tape around here, and it'll vent out. So the reason why this is not a port is, one, is there's no length to it, but also the size of this opening is a diameter of 4 inches, and the cone is only 4.5 inches. So roughly speaking, if you want to do an enclosure like this that's not ported but vented, okay, you need to have half of your cone area for an opening. Okay, so I did this, and I also ran an RTA and did some tests. Let's check those out. Let's play these things, see if it made much of a difference.
Okay, what I'm gonna do now is they are set up now venting. I do have foam on them, and I'm going to talk about some more of this stuff about back waves and reflections and stuff as well when I close this thing down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play these with a similar speaker and tell you, kind of demonstrate the output, and then I'm going to show you the RTA graphs that I came up with. So that was pretty cool. So this is vented. So what do you think? Let's check out those RTA graphs, and we'll go over a little bit more with this stuff and kind of visually see what the differences are. I mean, we could hear them, but let's visually kind of look at them.
So as you can see with the sealed kick, that we're getting a pretty good, about a 15 dB rise at around 250 hertz. You also see that it gets a pretty slow roll off on the bottom end, which means that the enclosure is probably helping with that. And with the open vented baffle, you can see that we've got the similar peak, but we have a little bit steeper of a roll off on the bottom end, and then we have some dips just ahead of the yellow line, and those are most likely due to some sort of back wave, sound wave cancellations, which will go away most likely once it's installed in the car, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, and now for comparison, we have the Focal Flax in the open baffle, and as you can see, the frequency response is fairly flat. So this is no EQ, and this is just how they are in the baffle. So I think they perform pretty well. So while the other one had a bit of a boost in the mid bass, I think these have a lot more linear flat response. So what did we learn today? Well, before I get to that, if you haven't seen any of the amp rescue videos that I do, this one's going to be coming up on one. I got this thing blown up, and I've been learning how to fix these things with some help from my good buddy David. Thanks, buddy. So anyway, so what did we learn today? Right? Um, that sealed kicks, while they may sound like a great idea, a lot of times they're really just not feasible. And like I said, we needed twice as much airspace in that kick, and it would have been too obtrusive. It would look terrible, and it wouldn't have worked. So keep in mind, most 2-3-way component sets, those speakers are meant to be run in an infinite baffle. That's why they have the suspension system on them. That's why we get those TS parameters. They're meant to be run in an open baffle, infinite baffle, excuse me. And, not necessarily a sealed enclosure. So, in a lot of cases, you're going to have to run a really big enclosure to make those things sound any better than you're going to get from an infinite baffle. So that's one thing that we learned. Also, the vented kick, you're going to need to make sure that that's sealed off well. And if it's not possible, you're going to figure out where you want those back waves and those sound waves to go. So I'm fortunate that I can vent them actually literally outside the car, into the cowl, the kick area, wherever they're going to go. So you don't get that back wave cancellation, which we did kind of see a little bit possibly of that in the RTA images there, where there was some dips in there, pretty profound. That's what you'll see as a really big dip, or a spike or something, when you got some sort of noise cancellations or some back waves and stuff like that too. So also we learned a little bit about the FS and where to start with your crossover points and stuff like that. Now I do feel like with an enclosure and certain things that you might be able to cheat that number down and get the speaker to play a little bit lower. You did see in the RTA that the speakers did play a little bit lower and better than the frequency response graphs that were provided by Focal. So I didn't see quite as steep of a drop off on those things. Being in that enclosure. So also don't expect too much from your drivers. This isn't magic. You're not going to build some sort of magic enclosure that you're going to get this 6.5-inch speaker to just really put out some pounding mid bass. But you did see that there was a bit of a spike at 250 hertz, which I think most people are going to like. Now everybody says, hey, I want a flat frequency response. Flat sounds like crap. I'm just going to go out there and say it, and you guys can leave the comments and the hate, all 52 of you that have watched this long in this video. But realistically, our ears like that sound and that punchiness, and the speakers were very capable of producing frequencies at that level, very well without distortion. So I think the enclosure is really going to work out really well. It's got me thinking that maybe I'll build some new enclosures for the test bench and stuff like that as well. So anyways, I appreciate you guys watching, and go ahead and pick up one of our channel stickers, and just make sure you like and subscribe. We're going to be doing a lot more of stuff like this, and hey, I'm learning along the way too. I'm a maker, I'm a builder, I'm an engineer. Car audio is something that I just enjoy doing, and I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm still learning a lot. I still have a lot to learn. So, I've got some great people and some great friends, and I really appreciate you guys interacting with you. And this is a lot of fun, and let's enjoy this. And follow us on Facebook. That's a great place to message me directly And you know, you can post your stuff there as well as you like and stuff. So anyways, thanks for watching. Check out my other videos. We'll catch you next time.